Ready yourself, my champion. I cannot aid you in this battle.
How unexpected.
You might be saying, that doesn't look like that much damage. The problem with this build is it actually has so much damage that was on a 2-link. It is the most damage I have ever seen in Path of Exile outside of some broken Josui build. It is more than basically any stat stacker that I've ever seen or anything relative to how much that I spent on this build. It is the most damage I have ever done or seen in Path of Exile. These are not fluffed up or fake numbers at all. Now let me show you what it looks like on a 6-link.
I cannot aid you in this battle.
And she's dead.
Oh, release.
And there's actually ramp in this build as well because we have wither stacks and all that type of stuff. And this is also my lower damage quality of life configuration. I could easily have 2 or 3x the damage if I cared about that, but it's more damage than you need at all in Path of Exile. This is my favorite build ever in Path of Exile, and I've even worked on a very, very actual budget version that the price should not be able to go out of control. So if you want to play a variation of this that is accessible to more players in the game, I also have that for you guys. This is going to be a very long video, much in the vein of my KFR build. In my opinion, this build is even better than Cast on Crit Forbidden Right. For me, it feels better and is even more fun to play. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get started. This is my cold/chaos, reap/exsanguinate/ whatever physical spell you want to use, occultist. Like I said, this is my favorite build ever, and I really hope that you guys are able to give it a shot and enjoy it as well. The quality of life, the speed, the everything, it's just out of this world. So how did it start? It all started with Captain Lance saying that he wanted to see me make a build with the original Sin Ring. If you don't know, the original Sin Ring is the reward from the no-hit run in the Forbidden Sanctum right now. It is a very hard to get ring. It is currently going for about 150 divines. The price has been going down and up. It dropped to 80 for one point, went up to like 180. Prices around there, whatever. Very, very hard to get ring, very expensive right now. Don't worry, budget-minded exiles, I have you guys in mind as well. So yeah, Captain Lance, he had a perfect no-hit run character ready. I was playing Bane on my league start. So I did 2 one-hit runs, but it's just like not perfect for no-hit. You really want Tornado Shot or Icicle Mine, something that can off-screen to make those one-hit runs comfortable. So anyway, he offered to do a no-hit run for me. His one ask of me was to make a build with it. So yeah, after he did that carry, I sat down and I started playing around with stuff. If you saw my videos in the past couple weeks, you saw I was originally doing Blade Vortex and like really struggling with the clunkiness, especially if you're watching me on stream. I just like Blade Vortex has like all of this like weird scaling stuff. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I didn't find it particularly comfortable. I just generally find it an annoying to use skill anyway. And then I thought, why not just use Reap or Exsanguinate? Like those are the traditional high damage skills. People do cold conversion with those already. What can I do with that? You know, traditionally people will do it on something like an assassin or even like a champion in hardcore, something like that. And I wanted to kind of put my own twist on it with the original Sin Ring, do it with cold to chaos conversion on an occultist. And that's what I did, and it's been absolutely ridiculous. The damage numbers that you can not just theoretically get, but comfortably get, even at low investment, is really, really good. The cool thing is the foundation of the build, just a cold conversion Reap Occultist, is really, really strong. And I'm also very proud to say I put together this build without ever opening up PoE Ninja, really looking at anything that anyone else is doing. And I'm really proud to say that this is my best and favorite build of all time. I've spent the past 9 days working on this build. Basically, if I have been awake, I've been working on this build, thinking about it, laying in bed, sitting there thinking about like, oh, could I swap this gem? Maybe I could recraft my jewels, move some res around, and whatever. So yeah, long story long, this build is crazy. I highly recommend it. It uses some broken items that I would not be remotely surprised to get nerfed next league. The damage very much does rely very specifically on one incredibly broken item that is accessible. It's a very, very cheap item right now. And yeah, it's pretty nutty. All right, so a little bit of detail. It's a fizz to cold with added fire into chaos if you go for the high investment version, conversion occultist. You can use any physical spell that you want. I strongly prefer and recommend Reap and Exsanguinate. Reap may be the single highest damaging skill in the entire game due to one specific mechanic with Awakened Spell Cascade. And Exsanguinate for me is one of the best clearing skills in the game. You know, there's Kinetic Blast and Tornado Shot, which are just like S++ tier, but right below that, Exsanguinate is like really, really good. The mechanics that we're using is we're using Heatshiver. We'll be going into all the detail here a little bit later, but Heatshiver with Expedition's End if you need it for the Chaos version of the build. With the Aspirational version, we get the original Sin Ring, which converts all of our elemental damage into Chaos damage, which then lets us take advantage of Wither, and we don't have to worry about cursing at all anymore because the nearby enemies all have 0 res already. So that opens up a lot of design space of the build. So the pros of this build, it is 20 out of 10 damage. I can't even say 10 out of 10. It is 20 out of 10 damage. It is actually no exaggeration. It is actually, now this is like theoretical, you know, full glass cannon with blade vortex, whatever, everything up. But yeah, that's a real number. That is 2.3 billion damage per second. And the numbers are just absolutely crazy. No matter what you do, you're going to be doing more damage than you need. And that's what actually opens up a lot of design space for the build, for being more quality of life focused, more defensive focused. And then you can balance it for however you like it in your own build. 9 out of 10 speed. I'm currently playing it with Haste and Onslaught. You can toss in Headhunter, Inspired Learning, Mage Blood, whatever you like, your own flavors of it. Because we are doing Fizz as extra element, Headhunter is actually really good for this build. I actually haven't even used it with a Headhunter Inspired Learning, but just knowing how it works. If you want to like blast maps, you know, do 100% delirious maps without spending like a mirror on a bow, I think this build could do that like on actual like S tier. It's really good. Exsanguinate absolutely destroys everything. We get really good Explodey either using Orias End, or if you're doing the cold version, you can have really good shatters. Not to mention that Herald of Ash actually helps propagate really good explosions. In terms of cons for the build, there's a lot of swapping that you have to do to play it like optimized. Ralakesh's boots to start a boss fight because you want to start with your power charges. Based on the encounter that you do, I like to swap a lot of gems and a lot of flasks. I like to min-max things a lot. You don't have to do this at all. Honestly, you can just do Exsanguinate with Awakened Chain in boss and do whatever you want in the game. I like to min-max things, so I like to swap a lot of things. But that is like kind of a struggle. If we look in my inventory, you'll see that like I have a lot of stuff that I swap in and out based on what I'm doing. You know, if I'm bossing, I put in a sulfur flask and a silver flask. If I'm mapping, I put in Orias End and a quicksilver flask. If I'm doing lab, I use a stone golem and determination. And when I go between reap and exsanguinate, you know, I'm putting in awakened chain or hypothermia and yada. So there's a lot of mechanical min-maxing that you can do, but it is all optional. At my version of the build, I'm still doing like 100 million DPS with Exsanguinate, even on a 5 link. So like I don't have to do that min-maxing, I just choose to. The balancing of the offense and defense is really tight. You know, like I said, I've been playing this build for like 8 or 9 days, constantly tweaking it. One of the biggest struggles is knowing that I can get more damage and just like seeing, oh, if I drop those 2 life points, I could get another 10 million DPS. But the thing is, if you're already doing like 300 million damage per second, like why 10 million more? You got that like damage brain and you just want to do more damage and you just like keep pushing yourself towards glass cannon. But like the big thing I really want to emphasize is this does so much damage. You can give up like half of it, still do 100 million DPS, and which is more than anything in the entire game needs at all, period. And then go for pure quality of life, which is the version of the build that I have right now. And then the other big downside is high-end scaling can eat infinite currency. As soon as you get into the original Sin Ring, much like Kakafar, you know, when you get to the Mage Blood and you start going for like synth daggers and all that type of stuff. Very similar here is that as soon as you get original Sin, you want to get an Expedition's End, which the price has gone up a lot. Expedition's End was 100 chaos when I started working on this build. You know, I've been working it live on stream. People have been following along. The price last time I checked was 20 divines. Yeah, as soon as you get original Sin, the price does go up really quickly because you start like min-maxing and getting crazy stuff. But without the original Sin version, you can play this for about 20 to 30 divines. You go up to 50 divines without the original Sin, and you're still looking at like 60+ million DPS very comfortably with the cold version. So don't worry, I got you guys covered as well. So where does the damage come from in this build? The foundation of this build is we are doing a full physical skill, 100% fizz converted into cold. We are also getting additional fizz as extra cold using things like Taste of Hate. We are also using Hatred, which gives us fizz as extra cold and then more cold damage multiplier. It double dips. That's why Hatred is super broken. And then the big thing that is absolutely broken that I would not be remotely surprised if it gets nerfed next league is the Heatshiver Leather Hood, which gains 1% of cold as extra fire per 1% chill effect on the enemy. Max chill effect is 30%, but if you're using Expedition's End with Original Sin, all enemies near you will have a 15% chill. And then the real big broken thing is the 100% cold as extra fire against frozen enemies. As soon as you freeze that enemy, you just get a gigantic more damage multiplier effectively, and you do very big damage. We can show this right here. You can see 639 million DPS. Yes, that's real damage per second. And this is like a real build. This isn't fake numbers at all. I want to keep emphasizing this. These are real stupid actual numbers. See, you can see enemy is frozen is checked right now. If I uncheck that, it goes down to 345. We are almost doubling our damage by just freezing the enemy. And at high investment, since we're using Expedition's End, freeze enemies as though dealing up to 100% more damage. We are always freezing with Expedition's End. We are getting that double damage very, very consistently. You know, and then if we're doing the cold version, we are hitting hard enough that we are freezing very often. And then we are always getting the 15 to 30% chill effect addition no matter what. So yeah, that's why Heatshiver is super, super broken. And then the big thing, like I said, that really kicks it over the edge, this is the high investment version, is with the original Sin Ring. All elemental damage is converted into chaos damage, and nearby enemies chaos res is 0. When the nearby enemy's chaos res is 0, we don't even have to use Despair to curse. That opens up a lot of room for investment in the build, and then it opens up the ability to use Wither, which when you invest into Wither effect gives us a 135% increased damage taken, which if you don't have any other increased source of damage taken is 2.3x more damage on the build, just straight up. The other tech that I recommend in the low investment version that I don't use in the high investment version because I find it annoying and I don't need that additional damage is the Balance of Terror Jewel. This jewel is very strong. In the low investment version, this just gives you such a gigantic chunk of damage. I strongly recommend it. At the very least, get the Enfeeble one. This goes to 40% crit multi if you've cast Enfeeble in the past 10 seconds. This does work for the cold version, but it's even better for the chaos version. Is you can also gain 40% of physical damage as a random element if you've cast Ally Weakness in the past 10 seconds. And then in addition to that, you can get a 3-mod one. Hits will inflict Wither if you've cast Despair in the past 10 seconds. So if you can get that triple mod, then you can, push your damage to the next level. You have to manually cast each curse. You can't use Bane. You can't use Arcanist Brand to trigger it. You have to manually cast it. You may have seen some folks when they're streaming that they are walking around and manually casting a lot of curses, and that's because they're using Balance of Terror, which really pushes their damage to the next level. And then the other thing is we are power charge scaling. That is why we are playing an Occultist. Power charges give us so much. Gives us increased damage, increased AoE, which helps us get the Reap overlaps with Awakened Spell Cascade. Very, very important, actually. And then power charges give us crit chance, crit multi, all that type of stuff. Lots and lots of damage. Okay, before you go away, I'm going to go over this really, really quickly. Feel free to skip forward, but I wanted to just have a realistic explanation of how the damage actually works. This is a lot of damage, and I think it's really important if you're putting this build together yourself to understand it. I'm going to try to go over it quickly, but in detail. I think this will help you understand just how damage works in the game at all, and just how it's absolutely so crazy. So if we start with like a level 28 Reap, which is possible with higher investment, we have a base of 3,000 physical damage. We convert it 100% to cold. Then we have Herald of Purity, Hatred, and Taste of Hate. This is before conversion. So anything that says as extra when you're converting down the line will be pulling off the as extra to get that additional damage as you're doing the conversion down the line. And then as we know, the damage conversion order is Fizz, Lightning, Cold, Fire, Chaos. We can only go one direction. It doesn't loop around. Herald of Purity gives us 15% more Fizz off the base. And then Hatred and Taste of Hate give us 15 plus 26% Fizz is extra cold. And then all of that gets multiplied by 19% more. So what that does is from a base of 3,000 Fizz, we get 15% extra. We multiply that by the as extra, and then we multiply that by the 19% more. Gives us 5788 cold damage after conversion. And then since we are an Occultist, we actually multiply that by 15% more cold damage, giving us 6656 on the base cold damage that we're doing. And then with Heatshiver and Herald of Ash gives us 15% Fizz as fire. So from that 3450, we add in 15% of the Fizz as fire. And then the big broken thing is the Heatshiver, the 100% more from the frozen enemy. And then the 15 to 30%, we're going to go on the low end with 15%. It's for 115% cold as extra fire. And then using Edziri's Promise, both on the Fizz damage and as the combined cold and fire damage, we pull 8% off of that as well as extra chaos. The full summary here is 18,277 cold plus fire, which all gets converted to chaos damage. And then we do the Edziri's Promise against just the Fizz and the cold plus fire. And then all of that gets converted to 20,000 chaos damage, which then gets multiplied by 15% more again because of Occultist. That's a really cool thing about this build, is since we're doing both cold and chaos, Frigid Wake and Withering Presence are both giving us 15% more damage multipliers, which is obviously incredibly powerful. We take our base 23,017 chaos damage. I'm just going to multiply it by our gem links. We got Void Manipulation. We got Power Charge on crit. I'm just going to count that as 10 power charges. That's 40% more damage. Awakened Spell Cascade is a 4x multiplier. This is why Reap is so broken. And then we have 600 crit multi. For multiplying that all together gives us 1,074,000 damage. And then here's the real big broken thing with Original Sin is because the enemy has no resist, We don't have to worry about cursing or anything like that. Wither gives us 135% increased damage taken, which if we have no other source of increased damage taken, which this build does not. So we just multiply that, and then our base crit is 2.5 million damage. And that is before we scale any increased damage whatsoever. If we just do a generic 650% increased damage, which is what I have right now, we cast 3 times a second. We have 6 blood charges, which is how Reap works. It gets blood charges, which gives it a more damage multiplier. That gives us 113.679 million damage per second. Even if your eyes just glazed over and you just let it wash over you and you didn't understand anything that I said, hopefully that number convinces you alone. I recognize that there's a lot of fluff and stuff going on in here. My real damage, as you can see here, is like 639 million. I'm actually simplified and I'm missing quite a bit here. As we all know, if you get to like 50 million DPS in the game, that's like too much, right? That's already more damage than you need for basically anything, as long as you have an actual well-rounded character. We have so much damage. This gives us a lot of headroom to work with. We can kind of scale back on that, figure out how much damage we're comfortable with, start doing defense and utility and stuff. And that's kind of like what I did as I worked on the build for the past 9 days. All right, why do we use Reap and Exsanguinate? So Reap is our main single target damage skill, and then Exsanguinate is our clear skill. It still does enough damage. You could boss with it if you wanted to, but I like to swap them to min-max. Reap has gigantic, huge base damage with 210% effectiveness of added damage, which is a really solid amount of damage. The big thing that makes Reap absolutely giga broken is the fact that there's a 4x overlap with Awakened Spell Cascade. The big demonstration that kind of like kicked this off and why people know Reap is so good. Like a year ago or so when Jung Roan put out his Assassin Void Battery Power Charge Stacking Assassin, and he showed Phoenix dying in like 1 second, that kind of kicked off to people just knowing how strong the skill is, but it's kind of just been slept on and under the radar. There's always like a solid amount of people that play it. For some reason, it's not looked at as meta, which I find really interesting. Particularly right now with Heatshiver, you just take a cold conversion Reap. Even at lower investment, you toss a Heatshiver in there with power charge stacking, and we're looking at tens of millions of DPS. Unfortunately, the price of Woke Spell Cascade, also, as I've been working on this build for the past week, has been going up. You do need Woke Spell Cascade for Reap to really reap the benefits of its damage. You can just use Exsanguinate with Spell Echo. You're still looking at like really good damage, but you're not going to have that big damage like Reap has. To demonstrate how it works, this is what Reap does. Reap does like a little slash in front of your character. It only does damage in the slash. So there's basically this like slash AoE in front of your character. That's what actually does damage. It kind of has a dead zone in the middle. So no damage happens in that dead zone. So that is the thing you have to be careful with, is like where you cast it. It is kind of like a big slash, so you get most of a circle. This is a bit more accurate. So dead zone right there, but this whole slash will do damage. And the other thing is you can scale AoE. If I have my power charges, you can see it's much bigger. You can see that the effective damage area is much thicker. It'll hit many more enemies and it's a lot more comfortable. Now, the big thing is Awakened Spell Cascade for this skill specifically is broken. What it does is it allows your Reaps to overlap. You can actually get 4 overlaps with at least 120% increased AoE. Every single one of these slashes, there will be a sweet spot that actually overlaps, and you get 4x damage right there. But you can see there's like this sweet spot where there's a slash, the slash right there, the slash right there, and then this one's right there. So as long as the enemy is like, kind of thicker, this is where it's going to be hit by 4x of your hits. Even if it's only 3 of the hits, you're still doing like 300 million DPS or whatever your investment is. But that's the basic idea behind Reap. Regular Spell Cascade, you can hit 2 times, but I feel like it's not worth it, and you're better off just using Exsanguinate with Spell Echo. The other thing about Reap is it gets blood charges. So there's a couple things that ramp in this build. We get Wither stacks and then blood charges on Reap. So every time you hit an enemy with Reap and it doesn't die, you get a blood charge, which gives you 15% more damage. If you get the Helm enchant, which I have not been able to get, you get +1 blood charge for 6. It's 15 times 6, and you'll do 90% more damage. Almost a 2x damage multiplier. It's absolutely crazy. Now, the other thing about Reap and Exsanguinate is they do cost life instead of mana. This has a pro and a con to it. The pro is we never care about mana scaling at all, right? I can sit here and spam it all day. The problem is Reap, when you do have blood charges, it actually costs more life as well. So when you get your max blood charges, you do have to be a little bit careful. If you're like fighting a boss and it doesn't die really quickly, you're going to see your life kind of going down. You're going to be hurting yourself. The other thing is like you have to run a high level of vitality, and you can even run a stone golem if you want to get even more regen right there. So if you're not running vitality and or stone golem, you see your life just goes down. So I do recommend, I have a level 21 vitality. Very, very important to make the build feel comfortable. But the cool thing about this is we don't need much mana for using our skills whatsoever, which makes mana management really easy. If you want to, you can even easily use Eldritch Battery with Divine Blessing for an additional aura. And, that never matters because your main skill only costs life. Now, alternatively, you can use Exsanguinate. I prefer this for clearing. It shoots out a bunch of tendrils. It'll hit up to 10 enemies, and then you can link it with chain support. And then, whether chain or awaken chain, it'll chain 2 to 3 more times per those 10 enemies. It will hit the entire screen. It clears everything. For me, it is one of the best clearing skills in the entire game. It feels and looks so awesome. Like, I have the MTX to make it nice little rainbows and flowers, but by default, it's just like a bunch of blood. You can get the mercurial silver colored one that doesn't look sus at all if you prefer that one. But I really like the rainbows and the flowers. Looks awesome. If you like the feel of Arc and Vol Arc, it's like that, but it actually just does a lot of damage. Big problem with Arc is it just like, the numbers are pretty bad. Kind of a crappy skill, but it feels mechanically really good. Exsanguinate just like really captures that feel. Every single cast feels like Vol Arc. It's crazy. I'm popping entire legions in like 2 casts. It feels so good. And then the really cool thing about Exsanguinate is with the 270% effectiveness of added damage, and you look at that base damage, those numbers in that damage calculation that we were doing were based off 3,000 base damage. This one is like 3,200 base damage. Now we don't get the blood charge more multiplier, but we do get a lot of base hit off of this. And Exsanguinate can just boss fine as well if you want to. Just replace chain with something like hypothermia, and you're off to the races. You can just use Exsanguinate if you never want to gem swap, or you can just use Reap, and the clear won't be as good, but then you don't have to swap for bossing. Entirely up to your own personal choice. Other options, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here. I tried Blade Vortex. Theoretically, it can do insane giga broken damage. That 2 billion damage number that I've been showing, that is using Blade Vortex with Vol Blade Vortex out. That's theoretical damage. That's not real. It just felt really, really clunky. The main problem with Blade Vortex is you need to scale AoE and duration. Borderline a melee skill until you get really big AoE. And then it has this real clunky, like walking forward, casting my Blade Vortex with Unleash, walking forward, Blade Vortex with Unleash. And then you have to fight things melee. Just didn't click for me. I've never loved Blade Vortex. Can't super recommend that. Bladefall Blade Blast, totally viable as well. Blade Blast specifically has really, really high burst damage. The problem is you have to invest both into Bladefall and Blade Blast, have multiple different links together, and you're scaling AoE and less AoE and all that type of stuff. And it's also a 2-button playstyle. So if you like it, it's a very beautiful skill. I find it very aesthetic and it feels cool to use. But then it just kind of gets a little clunky with the 2-button playstyle, particularly if you get like stunned or something. Just when you did your Blade Fall, you get stunned, you die before you can Blade Blast. I do find that a little clunky. And then Ethereal Knives, EK, is really, really good clear. The damage numbers are decent. The problem is you basically have a mandatory helmet chant if you want to feel really, really good for clear. If you don't have AoE fires in a circle, it kind of feels kind of crappy. It's also a very expensive helmet chant right now because of the Ignite version. And the single target damage just feels really, really bad. And the problem is you can't just like easily swap from like EK into any of the other skills. They all have their own like specific scaling. If you want to map quickly, that might be the best option. Yeah, I just don't see it looking really, really good. Like I said, the idea is fizz to cold. We want to use our fizz spells. Honestly, like the highest theoretical damage might be something like Seismic Trap or Explosive Trap or something like that. But for quality of life and just like feeling really, really good, this is what I recommend. Now, why did we choose Occultist? Well, she's the best. We all know that she's the best ascendancy in the game. What do the number nerds care about? So the big thing is she has 15% more cold damage, which we also get the -20 cold res on the low investment without the original sin. But the big thing is we can double dip with 15% more multipliers when we switch to original sin, and we're also converting into chaos damage. So the cold damage, 15% more, and then the chaos damage, 15% more, which if we use a handy dandy calculator right here, 100 times 1.15 times 1.15, that's actually 32.2% more damage. That's more than just a single 30% more damage multiplier, especially when you stack more increase in flat damage on top of that. You're kind of double dipping in like really interesting ways. Particularly with the original sin version, we also get free Wither. Occultist Wither is very, very special. By default, Wither stacks only last 2 seconds, so refreshing them and keeping up 15 stacks is kind of unrealistic. Not so for our friend the Occultist. Her Wither stacks actually last 15 seconds. So after 15 seconds, no matter what, you're at max Wither stacks and they will not go down. Now, we do use Withering Step to kind of like kick that off. And then the other really big thing, of course, is she has power charge scaling. This helps so much with everything about the build. It's like the foundation of a lot of the damage of this build. We get AoE per power charge. This helps us hit that 120% required AoE for Reap to get those 4 overlaps. We get damage per power charge. and we get +1 max. The power charge after spending mana, we don't really rely on that. We kind of rely a lot on power charge on crit, where it'll self-sustain very quickly once you get enough that you're critting consistently. So yeah, that's why she's the best. Now at the low investment version, the non-chaos version, I did test Elementalist. She has some bonuses and she has some downsides. Now, at the low end, she can scale damage easier with her exposure. Remember, exposure does nothing for chaos. We don't care about exposure. We can't change the amount of res. But when we're doing the cold version, we want to be doing Ellie Weakness, Frostbite, Assassin's Mark, using very strong exposures, and Elementalist gets that extra bonus on the exposure, as well as the 30% more elemental damage multiplier from Heart of Destruction. So she is really, really good for that. Bastion Elements is really good as well for being tankier, being Reflect Immune. Now, here's the problem. This build really is based around power charge stacking. You could maybe do something with Elemental Overload. Like, I haven't tested low budget. Maybe it's even viable as a League starter as an Elementalist and switch to Occultist later. I'm not sure. You really need the Forbidden Power. So, like, as an Elementalist, you can get the Forbidden Flame and Flesh Jewels to get the Forbidden Power Ascendancy notable from the Occultist. But it's, like, kind of expensive. And, it, like, is it really worth it? I don't know. It's, like, it does a little bit more damage, but not enough, in my opinion, to really make it worth it. You could get the Heart of Destruction Jewels on the Occultist if you want really, really big AoE. But actually, it's not that much more damage either. So I just think Occultist is just the best regardless. Not to mention, like I said, Withering Presence helps so much with the Wither stacks. I think she's just the best. All right, now let's start talking about some of the fundamental pieces that go into the build for how you want to put it together. So very, very mandatory for this build is 100% Fizz to Cold conversion. Every percent of Fizz that you don't convert to Cold is way more than 1% less damage because we have so many multipliers, so much Fizz is extra, so much Cold is extra fire from the Heatshiver that we have to get everything to Cold ASAP. This is the foundation of the build. Easiest one that you're going to start off with is the Cold Mastery, 40% Fizz converted to Cold. That's an absolute freebie. You can get that from the Cold nodes right here. We're going to take Breath of Rhyme. We don't get that much out of any of these nodes right here. Since this mastery is mandatory, that is why we path through that. We do get a little bit of damage, but the effect of Cold Ailments doesn't really do anything. Effective Chill does not affect, I tested it. It does not affect the 15% chill from Expedition's End. So in the original Sin version, that does nothing for the build. The gloves are a bit of a pain in the butt to craft. You need exactly the max of all of these numbers here, which is really, really annoying. You actually need the perfect implicit from the Eldritch implicit there. The 35% is pretty annoying to hit, honestly. You have to use a lot of Orbs of Conflict to hit it. Now, conversely, you can actually get 35% Fizz converted to Cold as the Unveil. I think that's actually the cheaper budget version. You could just craft these gloves really simply with a Veiled Chaos Orb until you unveil Fizz converted to Cold. The 35% saves you from going from perfect on the gloves, and it opens up a lot of space for like a lower budget version of the build. So instead of going for perfect, you can just go for exceptional. You save that 10%. It's a lot easier as a budget version for the build. And then another option is 40% Fizz converted to Cold while affected by Hatred. A perfectly rolled one right now, there were a few up for 4 Divines. You actually don't even need 40%, right? You only need 35%. You can go for a lower rolled one. So that's an entirely other option as well. Now, the other mandatory pieces for the build that gives us a ton of damage, the Heatshiver Hood. This is basically the core of why this build is broken, why the damage numbers are so crazy. Like I said, 1% of Cold is extra fire per chill effect. Chill by base is about 15%. Goes up to 30%. If you get Shaper Winter, it can go up to 40%. Against frozen enemies, which you freeze all the time with Expedition's End, you get 100% on top of that. And then, since we're in the Chaos version, all of that's converted to Chaos, so we're pretty agnostic about the element. It's an insane amount of damage. Void batteries, they're not very expensive, 100 Chaos or less. Usually, who knows, maybe the demand will go up after this video. I have no control over that. I bought Corrupted ones for like 50 Chaos last week. They were not expensive at all. I actually did a demonstration kill of Unending Hunger with a Storm Prison equipped. So you can also do this. It still gives you +1 power charge. It gives you not much damage besides that, but you can equip 2 of these off the bat, and you're off to the races for like the foundation, like super budget build. And then since Fizz as extra Cold is like the foundation of the engine for all the damage in this build, Taste of Hate is absolutely mandatory. Strongly recommend getting that. Every 1% damage, like I said, right, is so much more damage on the build. So getting a perfectly rolled Taste of Hate, particularly the Fizz is extra Cold. The Fizz taken as Cold is nice for defense, but that's the most important part about the build. Absolutely mandatory is to, have this. Like I said, you can use a Storm Prison instead of Void Battery at low investment, but Heatshiver and Taste of Hate are like very, very foundational, even at the budget version of the build. What to do with your Heatshiver? The best corruptions are +1 power charge and 90% socketed mana reservation. There was one up on the market when I started working on this build, but I didn't buy it. Much to my absolute chagrin. Mana reservation, as we get into a little bit later, is really, really tight on this build. Since we're power charge stacking, that is just best in slot. The helmet that I have, I bought this for, I think, 3 divines last week, was 4% life and +1 power charge. The prices can go out of control. The +1 power charge is not mandatory. You can just use a base, non-corrupted version of the helmet. Like I said, this build has so much damage. Start off simple. Start off with the cheaper stuff. Don't invest right off the bat. Make sure you like the build first, too. I should have said this at the top, but like with any build guide, make sure that like try it at low investment. Try just like 10 divines, see if you like it. Don't buy all the gear for 100, 200, 300 divines and then be like, I don't like it. Try it first, please. Once you do like it, feel free to invest into it. Now, funny enough, the best in chance, Assassin's Mark Curse Effect is tied with +1 blood charges in effective damage. Assassin's Mark Curse Effect works for both Exsanguinate and Reap, and there's no scaling on Assassin's Mark Curse Effect. Whereas the blood charges, you actually have to hit your 6 blood charges to get that damage, and blood charges make you spend more life. Now, second best is +1 blood charges. So like we said, the blood charges for Reap for your single target damage. But I actually think Assassin's Mark Curse Effect is the best. It works for all your skills, better quality of life. Just gives us so much more crit multi. I think it's the best one. And then a runner-up would be Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity, Hatred, or Haste. Mana reservation efficiency. We want to reserve as many auras as we can. It is stacking so much damage on this build. Fizz is extra, more fizz, more speed, more cast speed, all that type of stuff. If we can just stack more auras, we get more damage and everything's better. So those are kind of like the runners up. You could even do Withering Step applies additional wither stacks. That's like a little bonus little runner up there as well. I ran 10 gift labs last weekend myself. A friend of mine ran 4 gift labs for me as well. We never saw any of these. So yeah, I'm a little I'm a little perturbed that I haven't hit any enchants on my own helmet yet. That's what is ideal, and that's what I recommend. Extra pieces for damage is very mandatory when you want to scale a little bit better, is Militant Faith with Dominus. What this does is it gives us Inner Conviction. I currently have 11 power charges, so that is a 33% more damage multiplier. Now, I can't naturally gain Frenzy charges anyway, but I don't really care about that. And I can use Frenzy charges at the beginning of my boss fight, right? Because of Ralakesh. If I kill the boss in less than 10 seconds, I'm actually always at max Frenzy charges anyway, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, like I said, it has to be carved by High Templar Dominus. And then what I prefer is increased area damage and effective non-curse auras per 10 devotion. I strongly recommend using the Find Timeless Jewel feature right here in Path of Building. You know, you can go down here, you can do, I want a Militant Faith, I want it conquered by Dominus, and I say the Jewel Socket. Unfortunately, it hasn't updated the name, so we actually want to say Minion Instability right here. It got renamed to Hexmaster, but that's what we want to do right there. And then you can click Search right here. Then what you want to do is double click these. It'll add it to your items, and you want to test them to make sure that it doesn't transform any of the good nodes in your build. So based on the number in there, right, like it'll transform some of these nodes into something else. An example right here is instead of getting mana regen, I get fire exposure if you have at least 150 devotion, right? So if one of these hit some of the nodes that we care about, right, that would be a bad jewel for the build. So use that Find Timeless Jewel feature in Path of Building, double click it, add it to your build. You can right click right here and add different jewels, try different Militant Faiths, make sure you find one that doesn't brick your build. Worst case, if you go to the trade website, right here, this little copy symbol, you can click this and then Control V into your PoB and copy it in, and you can actually test the item like that as well. Other thing is the Circle of Guilt unique ring. In the budget version of the build, this is actually what I recommend. I have a synthesized ring that's better than this, but Circle of Guilt for very, very cheap can get you off to the races. The most important thing that you need is increased buff effect. Gives us a more physical damage multiplier. So that's like the most important thing. Second to that would be increased physical damage, skilling that fizz. And then after that, I would do increased mana reservation efficiency. Like I said, being able to reserve more auras and get more comfortable with that can make juggling the build a lot easier. Ashes of the Stars is just really, really easy. I know it is a little bit more expensive right now, but mana reservation, if you're using any of the alternate quality gems. Other thing is the alternate quality gems that I'm using, none of them are mandatory. Those are just what I have recommended, what I'm using. Ashes of the Stars is just really, really good. If you don't go for Ashes of the Stars, this is an example of an amulet that I crafted for almost nothing last night, very, very quickly. This is a Redeemer Jade amulet. Strength and dexterity is hard to get in this build. All I did is I hit it with single jagged fossils. You could also do Reforged Fizz in Harvest. And you want to go for +1 level of physical skill gems. Gem levels are really, really big. They bump up that base damage that we're scaling everything off of. And then I did this until I hit Grace mana reservation efficiency. Ideal would be something like Hatred mana reservation efficiency, but Grace is good as well if you care about defense. Level above that would be Ashes of Stars, or you could craft this one even a little bit bigger and go for Fizz as extra cold or something like that on the prefix. But I crafted this one really, really easy, very quickly. Just a regular Redeemer amulet. You do want to keep it between item level 75 and 80. That makes it a lot easier to craft. Just Reforged Fizz, Jagged Fossils, really, really easy to craft for your budget version. Ashes of the Stars would be the next step above that. And then the step above that would be this, which is the amulet that I have. Fractured +1 level of all skill gems. And then crafted up like this. I think I just did Reforged Fizz until I got the +1 Fizz. Prefixes can't be changed. Ashling Slam the life on there. Prefixes can't be changed. Reforged crit until I hit T1 crit multi. This is like kind of best in slot for an amulet. And then we want to anoint Charisma as well. That's the kind of like the jewelry. The belt is like whatever. I just went for like a life belt, but a hunter belt that gives you life and chaos damage is really, really good. This one wasn't too hard to craft. You can go for whatever you want to. You can use pristine fossils. You can do Reforged Life. Whatever works best for you. But yeah, a Hunter Stygian Vise, I think, is the best. I think I've mentioned it once or twice so far, but Strength and Dexterity are very hard to get for this build since we're so stretched on the margins of the tree and we're using a lot of Strength and Dexterity gems. It's really hard to get enough stats. Yeah, my shield charge is only level 16 and I can't level it up. Like, I would love to have a level 20 shield charge to be a little bit faster, but unfortunately, I just can't get enough strength comfortably in this build. The mandatory high-end version of the build is Original Sin, which then we need Expedition's End to be able to freeze. Chaos damage by default can't freeze, right? We were doing Fizz to cold, but then Original Sin is converting that all to chaos, which then cannot chill or freeze. Expedition's End solves all of that. All damage can freeze, which means our chaos damage can freeze, our physical damage can freeze, our lightning damage can freeze. Freeze chilled enemies as though dealing up to 100% more damage. So we're effectively dealing double, like the freeze calculation is as if we're dealing double damage as well, which makes it very comfortable and consistent to even freeze big boy bosses. Now, the thing against big boy bosses is they do have a minimum action speed. So you won't be able to tell when they're frozen except for the symbol under their name, but they will be frozen. They're still going to be moving, but they're frozen. And then when you're going high end, I do recommend a critical strike chance while affected by Hatred Watcher's Eye. The other stat that I went for is gain life per enemy hit while affected by Vitality. Especially since we're spending a lot of our life as we're casting our spells. Those two nodes together, I think, are kind of like best in slot for our Watcher's Eye. Third on top of that would be something like either the Fizz conversion, which would open up an implicit on our gloves, or something like crit multi while affected by precision, toss in a level 1 precision and get 30 more crit multi. So yeah, this is kind of like all you really add in when you go high end, which is kind of cool. You get that no-hit run, you save up for Original Sin, get some more crit on your Watcher's Eye, and you're doing 600 million DPS. All right, I've already demonstrated the boot swap a few times. I recognize that it is very clunky, very annoying, but it is what it is. We really, really rely on our power charges to do our damage. So if we're looking at like the high damage setup right here, if I take off my power charges, I'm down to 130 million DPS. I literally get 6x damage turning on my power charges. That's the difference, right? And if you're not critting, like the damage is very inconsistent. It doesn't feel good. Talk about crit in a little bit. It's okay when you first go into a map because we're doing so much damage. We're able to kill monsters really quickly regardless. It doesn't really matter. But when we're starting a boss fight, you don't want to be doing 1/6 of your damage and then slowly ramping up. We really only get our power charges from power charge on crit. So when we're not critting without the power charges, it's kind of like a chicken and the egg thing, right? We can solve all that with Ralakesh's Impatience. While you are stationary, you get all of your charges. And then, as you're walking around, you lose all your charges, right? They all disappear. But the exploit with Ralakesh's Impatience is the downside goes away when they're not equipped. All you have to do is as the fight's spawning, right before it spawns, you just double click and then you get your charges. You don't lose them as you walk around. You get your power charges and then you're always critting. So your power charge on crit is always working. You're sustaining your power charges while you're fighting. Crit chance is a pain in the butt. With any high-end build, with any very well-balanced build, there are certain things that are always a consideration as you're kind of like moving stats around. And crit chance is one of them. The other one is strength and dex, like I said before. But crit chance is a struggle to try to have 100%. You can even see in this version of the build, I'm at 99.6, which is like, whatever. It's good enough, right? I even missed something on here. Let's toss this in. Crit chance, medium, cluster jewels. There are so many different ways that you can get your crit chance up. You want to get it as high as possible. The closer to 100, the better. I forgot another one. There's so many different options, and I want you to just like balance them around the way that you put the build together. There's a lot of ways that you can put this build together in a very budget way without buying and doing exactly what I did. And I always want to just give you guys as many options as possible. Play it how you want. Hatred Watcher's Eye plus 1.8% base crit chance, really, really big. A hunter chest. You can go for a hunter chest. This is actually what I was using for Blade Vortex. You can get +1 curse. You can get 1.5 up to 2% if you elevate it. And then you can get +1 curse on the prefix as well. If you're doing the low end budget version, you can very easily get in Frostbite, Ellie Weakness, and Assassin's Mark. And this opens up a lot of availability for more life, res, spell suppression, stuff like that. However, at the low end, I do recommend a Skin of the Lords for more damage. Diamond Flask with crit suffix. I'm using that already. More power charges is more crit. Bottled Faith is an option. Crit chance medium cluster jewels. You can go for pressure points, quick getaway, basics of pain, any of those guys. Critical strike support gem. This always feels bad to put in because it gives you no like damage, but if you're not critting, you're not doing damage. This basically by itself 100% solves your crit issues. At low investment, I do recommend just using this gem. You know, like I said earlier, you are always doing so much damage. Feel free to drop one of your gem links. As long as you're comfortable with your damage, you're killing the bosses quickly enough, you can drop a link and just put in increased critical strikes, and that can open up like another flask slot. Maybe you want to run an onslaught flask or something like that. You know, feel free to balance it for the quality of life of what feels good for you. Brittle Ground, you can get Brittle Ground on Implicit Boots. It's okay. It's really flaky, but it's okay on bosses. You know, you can run over where the boss was. It can last 4 to 6 seconds based on the implicit level, and that should be enough to kill the boss. I think it's Anomalous Reap has increased critical strike chance. You can just do that. Spell crit on a shield suffix if you use a shield version, and Ice Golem even if you want to do that. Mix and match whatever gets you to the most crit chance that you can get. As you go higher investment, you can go for the more expensive versions. The other super awesome thing about this build, it is fast. I'm using Divergent Frostblink, which gives even more cooldown recovery rate for rares and uniques. Absolutely not necessary whatsoever. You can use the regular one, or you can use Flame Dash if you just want to have some more charges. But Frostblink is really good since we're scaling so much cold damage. I actually end up exploding a lot of monsters on the screen just as I'm using Frostblink. And using the combination of Frostblink and Shield Charge, not to mention I'm actually scaling a good amount of attack and cast speed. Like hybrid attack and cast speed, I'm able to scale that in a lot of different places. Over on the cluster jewel, as well as these small nodes right here, just getting a lot of attack speed. And then when my flasks are up, like this is a fast build. Like we're talking like actually super fast. It just feels really awesome to get around, kind of going between Frostblink and Shield Charge, and you know, doing your Exsanguinate and just blowing up the whole screen. It is like as comfortable and zippy around as like any bow build that I've played. We also occasionally press Withering Step for, like I said, getting your wither stacks up, only for at the start of a boss fight, really. You don't need to press it any other time. And I am actually using a lightning golem. Like I said, you could use an ice golem, you could use a flame golem. That guy, he doesn't die very often. I've actually been finding that it lives pretty well. I'm using the anomalous version for even more increased buff effect, but just getting 12%, you know, with that buff effect, attack and cast speed from the lightning golem, it just feels really good. I've been enjoying it. I've only been resummoning him very rarely. You know, having him up at the beginning of a boss fight alone is enough to, you know, just make sure that I'm killing it right away. And then, yeah, Assassin's Mark as well. We manually cast that, you know, mark on hit. We don't really have enough accuracy to use it with shield charge. Besides that, Assassin's Mark lasts forever. We cast that once on the boss and we kill it. And that is it for our active skills. And then for our auras and mana reservation, for damage, absolutely mandatory is Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity, and Hatred. Herald of Ash gives us Fizz as extra fire and more spell fire damage. Basically double dips for us. Herald of Purity gives us more physical damage, you know, beginning of the equation. Absolutely mandatory. And then Hatred, like we showed, Fizz is extra cold and then a more cold damage multiplier. It double dips. It's broken. Those three are mandatory for utility and defensive auras. Vitality, like I showed before, really absolutely mandatory. You can get some life on hit. You can go for a Shaper Ring that gets life on hit from spells. There's a couple ways to kind of make up for it. But Vitality just makes the game more fun to play too. Just always having, you know, at least 200 to 300 life regen per second, walking over burning ground and stuff, not as uncomfortable. I hate having no life regen. So I really enjoy having Vitality. I am playing with Haste. So I made a video a couple weeks ago about how I find Haste just makes the game more fun. As long as I'm tanky enough, I don't feel the need to use Grace or Determination. Feel free to use them if you want to. My character, as I have built it right now, I have, as you can see, I have 5,700 life roughly. I have max spell suppression. I have a little bit of block. I got max res. It's enough. At this configuration, I've been dying very little. You know, I have some Fizz taken as cold. Azir's Promise actually gives me chaos damage, leeches life, so I have some additional leech right there. I can even toss in a Stone Golem, which I've been using once in a while for even more sustain right there. I've been dying very rarely. If you're additionally like death hesitant, you don't enjoy dying, like I know some people just really hate dying, and I got you covered. I have a slide for like showing my defensive proposal in a little bit, but you can always just swap out haste for Grace Determination. If you really care about ailment immunity, you can use Purity of Elements as well. As long as you have like these 4 always mandatory, you can swap in whatever else you want in addition, especially if you use Ashes of Stars. If you can get additional Enlightens if you want to. You could 100% squeeze in additional aura if you wanted to. You could use Eldritch Battery, and then, you know, if you're doing enough damage, you could even kind of like skip Hatred and then just use that on boss fights as well with like a Divine Blessing setup. I'm going to have a proposal for you guys for like a budget version, and then I'll show you how I built it myself when we go over the PoBs. So this is my defensive proposal. This is my budget PoB. This has 56k effective life, 30k Fizz max hit, 38k cold max hit because of Taste of Hate, max spell suppression, 75% evade, go shrouds. It actually has really good damage reduction because of Taste of Hate. It also uses Enduring Composure, so very often you'll have max endurance charges. And with all that, still 61 million DPS at roughly 30 divines invested right now. This is the budget non-original sin version, by the way. I should have opened the video with this because I think this is like the most impressive tab. 4,500 life, 465 ES. You can get more Fizz taken as if you want to craft your gear, like become very tanky against Fizz. Really solid regen. Even go into an armor variation if you wanted to. For ailment avoidance, that's very personal. There's ailment avoidance on the upper right side of the tree. It's not hardcore viable, but this is very, very tanky for regular softcore play. Also, the budget variation reserves Vitality with Arrogance support. You'll see that there is some reserved life, but that's how tanky it is, even with the reserved life. You know, I had higher investments. I bought a second Enlighten level 4, and I'm able to use Vitality against my mana. So anyway, this is in the proposed budget PoB. I just want to show you guys, it is not just a squishy glass cannon. You can put it together on a moderate budget for, you know, pretty well, with still keeping your damage insanely high. For jewel recommendations, Pen is really, really good. You can also just use the new jewel search trade feature in PoB. You know, look that up if you haven't seen how to use that yet. It'll just give you a trade for the most damage. If you're doing the cold version, cold pen is really, really good. Crit multi's good. Cast speed's good. Anything with increased Fizz, cold, or spell damage. And then on top of that, life, mana reservation, strength, dex, and resist. I have 1 large cluster jewel right now. If you want to go full damage, you can use multiple. Battle Hardened, Force Multiplier, and Iron Breaker. I'm actually not even spec'd into Force Multiplier right now. You could put anything that you want in there as the suffix. It does give me like a lot more damage, but those 2 passive points, I went into life instead. Force Multiplier is the 5% double damage and 25% increased Fizz. As the added small passives, I actually really like 3% attack and cast speed. You could put those 2 points in a Force Multiplier. I dropped them for life and spell suppression because I have too much damage. That's my recommendation on the jewels. For Pantheon, Bandits, and other Flasks, all Pantheons are optional. Because we are using Frigid Wake, we are immune to freeze and chill. And so usually Soul the Brine King is what I recommend. I don't get stunned that much now that I have 5,100 life, but when you have a lower amount of life, when you're at like 4K or less life, you're going to get stunned almost every single hit, where I think Soul the Brine King, unfortunately, is pretty mandatory. You know, if you really, really hate getting stunned, you can get stun on a Flask suffix and the enchant on your boots if you've killed recently, and then you're stun immune there as well. I really recommend actually not using Soul the Brine King in this build. I'm using Soul of Arcali right now just because like I'm running into a lot of damage over time. That's really annoying. But Solaris and Lunaris are both really, really good, and I might tech into those a little bit as well. Honestly, all the Pantheons are totally optional, whatever your own choice is. For minors as well, like, you know, I usually use Garokhan actually for reduced effect of shock. I hate being shocked or maimed. It's really annoying. Abrath is basically mandatory if you're using, you know, if you're doing the red altars because of all those Searing Exarch, Burning Ground. Yugle's really nice. Curses are very common in the game right now. So I'm a big fan of Soul of Yugle. And besides that, like my default that I often use is Ralakesh, just because I don't really have any anti-bleed on my character at all right now. And so when I'm just running around, I can ignore when I'm bleeding. And I have so much regen that the default bleed dot doesn't even affect me. Regarding Flasks, as you can see, I got a lot of Flasks in my inventory right now. Taste of Hate is absolutely mandatory no matter what. If you're doing the Chaos version, Its Series Promise, in my opinion, is very mandatory. It double dips with the double 8% Fizz is extra and Elemental is extra, not to mention the Leech is really good. When I'm fighting a boss, I actually put in a Sulfur Flask and a Silver Flask to make sure that I have Onslaught and just the 40% increased damage. Quicksilver is not going to do anything for me there. You know, Diamond Flask gets crit chance up. And then I'm using Orias End. This is not a cheap flask whatsoever. It looks like it's 22 divines. This is from Uber Cirrus. It gives us maximum life as a random element as Explode. Remember, we have Original Sin right here, so that gets converted to Chaos damage, and we actually get a more multiplier, and we scale the extra damage from Orias End. This flask is actually incredibly synergistic with Original Sin. I do not use this in the budget version of the build, of course, and especially since we're chilling and freezing, we can go for Shatters. You could use Herald of Ice, anything like that. You could use Blast Freeze, Freeze Proliferation as a glove implicit, anything like that for better Explodey. But honestly, Exsanguinate with Chain alone is already good enough on the budget version. what I really, really, really want to emphasize here, and I've said it a bunch of times already, but your balance between offense and defense is up to your own choice. I'm going to be sharing with you guys 4 PoBs. 4 PoBs, and a couple of them have multiple options in them as well. I want you to absorb the information in there. I want you to absorb the information in this video and really customize it how you want. There is so much damage on the table right now, right? Like, especially when you go the original Sin version, you're going to be looking at 600 million DPS and being like, I could drop those life nodes and get more. But the reason why I showed just killing the Black Star at the beginning of the video, there is so much damage in this build that I can't accurately show how much it is. I have to go to a 2-link to even have like a realistic boss kill. It's out of control. I strongly recommend, and it's really hard. Like I kept pushing the damage last week over like way beyond where I had to go. Drop the damage, just keep dropping the damage. Get to something comfortable, 50 to 100 million DPS, which is insane numbers already, right? Drop it down to 50 to 100 million. You kill the boss in 2 hits instead of 1, right? Go into spell suppression, get determination, get some armor, get some movement speed, make it feel good to play. I already am anticipating people going all out on damage, going full glass cannon, and then being like, the build feels bad. Those folks are going to be missing so much of the point of this. This is a framework and a foundation of a build that is so powerful. The damage is so free. You have like a whole open field over to your left here. You can just walk out into the open field, quality of life. You know, Zana's walking up to you with like a nice sweet iced tea, and everything is just awesome, right? Life is beautiful. You can choose whatever you want. The world is your pickle. However, people are going to be going all out on damage. They're just going to be in PoB, pushing that damage up to those insane numbers. Please make it feel good, make it comfortable for what fits you. If you just want a glass cannon, you want to do like Cast on Death Discharge, one-shot the bosses, feel free to do it. It's not going to feel good. You can make it feel good. So this is my PoB of my build right now. Look at this. These 2 points give me 30 million DPS. That's insane. Like, I see that number and I'm just like, how can I not take these 2 points? But then you look at it, that says plus 8% damage. You're going to want so badly to just take that damage, and you watch that number goes up, 413 million DPS. Oh my God, I need to take those points. I need to drop my life. Don't do that. I'm at 382 million DPS. Look at how stretched I am. I went all the way down here for max spell suppression. Max spell suppression. I took every single light. Like, I have dangly life nodes. I'm at 382 million DPS like this. I don't need more. Go for quality of life. I want to hammer that home. Do not overinvest into damage. All right. Anyway, like I said, I have 4 PoBs for you guys. One of them's like a joke PoB, but I just wanted to show. I'm going to try to make this as short as possible. I'm going to try to edit this down. Oh, please, God, let me get this closer to 1 hour than 2. I'm going to try to go as quick as possible here. I have a actual budget PoB. This is the cold version, the non-original Sin version. The estimated budget is about 10 to 20 divines for Exsanguinate, and plus the price of Awakened Spell Cascade for Reap. The problem is this gem is currently going for about 18 divines. There is nothing I can do about it. I don't know. Please, more people go out there, farm Maven. Make more of these drop. For getting the big Reap damage, there's only like 10 to 20 divines invested besides this gem. That's where this 61 million damage number comes from. This is the Reap setup. So total investment is like 20 divines plus that gem. I have no control over the gem price. The price probably will go up after this video, but this is the budget PoB. 20 divines invested plus the gem. You can just do Exsanguinate, and then you're looking at only 20 divines. And the Exsanguinate version is still around 20 million DPS, which is pretty good. 10 to 20 divines invested for 20 million DPS, in my opinion, and look at how tanky it is too, in my opinion, is very, very good. This is my proposal for the actual build that most people are going to play. I totally recognize that the original Sin version is like out of control, really expensive, crazy. I'm actually not going to go into a ton of detail about the other PoBs. This is the one I'm going to focus on. So let's go over the details and why it's a budget build. This is a level 100 character. Take that all into consideration. If you're lower level, probably just don't take spell suppression and, don't do the cluster jewels early. You're looking at lower damage. But yeah, this is the basic setup. So the most expensive thing in this version is probably the Militant Faith right here. I don't know the availability of this after I make the video. It is not absolutely necessary. We still have 14 million DPS without it. So it's not that bad, but it is, 25% of our damage. But still, 14 million DPS with like very little invested, I think is pretty good. This is with a cluster jewel. You do not need force multiplier right here. Like I said, it's not huge for the build. It's only 1.3 million DPS. So, you know, you can get something else as the final suffix. Ironbreaker, Battle Hardened. Very, very cheap, quick getaway, Basics of Pain. This is a 5 chaos jewel. And then Enduring Composure. This makes us much tankier. We gain an endurance charge every second if we've been hit recently. So if we get hit once in a while, we'll get our endurance charges up. Makes us very tanky against the next fizz hit that comes in. Besides that, all of the regular jewels that I have here on the tree are very simple. Some cast speed, attack speed for quality of life, some crit multi, or just crit multi in general, some life and stats and res. That's it. And then, yeah, max spell suppression. We also go in here for getting our chaos res up. Since we're doing the cold version here, we don't have Withering Presence, so we do have to invest a little bit to get our chaos res up. This version has double void batteries, uncorrupted. This is a non-corrupted, non-enchanted Heatshiver. This is a regular Skin of the Lords, just with minion instability. You can get one that has something else that's really good for the build. You can go for Mage Bane or Ghost Dance or something like that. But this is just a Skin of the Lords with nothing. We don't care about the keystone on this. Right now it's 3 red, 3 blue, which is like dirt cheap. It's like 10 chaos. So, you know, very, very cheap combination right there. Now, the most expensive thing here is the gloves. You know, like I said, that alternative is to get that very cheap Watcher's Eye. That's only 1 or 2 divines. They do have a Fractured Temple mod, but you can just find a pair of gloves that has any temple mod on the suffix. It can have the lightning res with the damage against shocked enemies, or the fire res for damage against ignited enemies. And then you can just do the harvest res switch. So look for any temple modded gloves that have any of those 3 reses and do the res switch. That's actually kind of like one of the arbitration scams that people do, is they search for those. My friends are going to be annoyed that I'm sharing this right now, but yeah, just look for any temple mod, do a harvest conversion, and you'll get the damage against chilled enemies. So that's actually like really easy to find and very cheap. You know, suffixes can't be changed. You can currently use a wild bristle matron, which is only 1 to 1.5 divines right now. If you have full suffixes, it'll guarantee give you suffixes can't be changed for much cheaper. And then you can just use a veiled chaos orb and try to unveil fizz converted to cold, or craft it yourself and go for the implicit. But like I said, if you go for the 35% unveil, then you can just go for the 25% on the implicit, and that's a lot cheaper and a lot easier to get. That's what I would recommend on a budget. The boots are nothing. I got some Fizz's extra cold and some increased action speed. Absolutely nothing on here. I bought Fractured Spell Suppression. It's got some movement speed, some stats. These are very, very easy to craft. Nothing special here whatsoever. This is with the very cheap amulet that I showed you a few minutes ago, but it has Hatred, Mana Reservation Efficiency, and +1 level of physical skill gems. Take a Redeemer amulet between eye level 75 and 80, throw it into Reforged Fizz, use Jagged Fossils. This is not hard to hit whatsoever. Very, very easy craft. This is a synthesized stone ring, which has max life and cold damage. The nice thing about this ring here is it gives us some stats, some life, some crit multi like that. Very easy to craft ring. Ideal ring is, you know, +1 power charge, damage per power charge, stuff like that. But this is a cheap ring. You know, this is like a 10 chaos base. That's very, very easy to craft. Very cheap, easy Circle of Guilt, Herald of Purity buff effect, and then additional physical damage reduction. This is a 10 chaos ring at time of recording, you know, but this is not super valuable. This is my belt still, you know, throw in a crappier belt if this is a little bit harder for you to craft. Phasing, oh, this is a thing that I did not mention yet. Phasing on kill on this Abyss Jewel is very, very useful. Strongly recommend making sure that you have that. That way we don't have to run a Quartz Flask and we don't bump into enemies at all. I've actually been really enjoying this mod right now. And then, yeah, a Jade Flask, Aziri's Promise, Taste of Hate, Diamond Flask, Silver Flask. Replace the Silver Flask with a Quicksilver for, you know, actually running around. And then just to quickly go over the skills right here, I have Exsanguinate with a level 3 Empower, increase critical strikes, power charge on crit, Spell Echo, Awaken Fire Pen, turn off the Spell Echo and use Chain for clearing, and then put in Spell Echo or Hypothermia if you don't have a white socket. Hypothermia is still pretty good. You'll still be doing, look, like almost 20 million DPS on this budget variation. Awakened Fire Pen, I bought this for like 20 chaos at level 5. Absolutely hilarious. We also get fire exposure for free right here, which is great. But I do have this Wave of Conviction for a little bit stronger fire exposure for bossing, but absolutely not mandatory. You know, it's just to push a little bit more damage at the low investment. Hatred, level 3 Enlighten, right? Like we're keeping this budget. Level 3 Enlighten, Hatred, Herald of Ash, Haste, and Grace. I currently have Grace turned on and not Haste. That's all personal choice, like I said. Vitality with Arrogance. Unfortunately, with the low investment, we don't have enough mana reservation efficiency to be able to fit that in. But if you just get, you know, like Grace or Haste, mana reservation efficiency, or Hatred ideally, right? Then you could probably move Vitality over to mana instead of life, and then you're going to get a lot more life back. But I wanted to show like the worst case budget scenario here. This is with Flame Dash and Arcane Surge, whatever. Use Frostblink if you want to. Summon Lightning Golem. I really, really like the Golem. I think he's working out really well. I will talk about the curses in a second. Random Herald of Purity right here. This Clarity does give us a little bit of damage because of the damage per auras, but we can just remove that. I'll delete that right now. Assassin's Mark, faster attacks, and shield charge. And then, yes, the curses right here. The key that I mentioned a little bit earlier is this Balance of Terror. It gives us plus 40 crit multi if you've cast Enfeeble, and plus 40 Fizz as random element if you've cast Elemental Weakness in the past 10 seconds. I have that simulated in the configuration right here with the Balance of Terror and the custom modifiers because it doesn't really show up properly in PoB yet. But basically what you want to do is you don't even have to hit an enemy, cast Enfeeble, cast Elemental Weakness, and you'll get those buffs from the Balance of Terror for 10 seconds. Right when the boss is spawning, you cast those 2 curses, and then you just get those bonuses. Oh, I was actually missing some damage since Enfeeble accidentally got checked on. Since we only have 2 curses right now, we want to do Assassin's Mark and Elemental Weakness. We don't want Enfeeble on the boss. So if I have that checked, right, the damage is going to go off. But then cast Ele Weakness and Assassin's Mark on the boss itself, and you'll get your full damage. Balance of Terror is crazy. It is so much more damage in the build. As you can see, about 20 million DPS with the Exsanguinate setup. This is roughly 20-ish divines invested. You know, price is very variable, but this is as budget as I could make it. This is the Exsanguinate clear setup. And then the only difference is we buy that 1 support gem, Awakened Spell Cascade, and then we can put in Reap. And you can see it goes to 60 million DPS. We literally triple our damage by going to Reap with Awakened Spell Cascade. That's the big thing. I don't know, Farm Maven. You know, if it's too expensive, Farm Maven until you can get that thing to drop. Triple your damage, and then you're super, super happy. So anyway, this is the budget PoB. I tried to make it as tanky as I could. Hopefully this is acceptable and fun for you guys. I tested it for a day. It felt very good to me, and I'm very happy that this build just feels and looks really playable, even at a relative budget. You know, it's not a league starter budget, but, you know, 20, 30, 40 divines as your second build. This should be very doable for most people. All right, and then I'm going to show you guys my actual build right now with my actual gear. You can see that even stretching as much as I could into quality of life, all the way down here, the problem is I have so many uniques. I can't get max spell suppression otherwise. I have Inveterate, I have Instinct right here. I didn't even take Force Multiplier, and I'm still at 245 million DPS. Yeah, it's crazy. You know, big difference is I have a +1 power charge shield, gives me shield charge, gives me some really good quality life. Since Chaos Damage can't chill and freeze, we're using Expedition's End. We're using the original Sin Ring. Orias End helps it clear really, really good. And then I get my Watcher's Eye right here that you see. This is what I have. Now, if I go for aspirational gear, I'm just going to highlight this really, really quickly. It's not full aspirational. It's just a couple bonuses. I get an enchant on my helmet, Socketed Gems, Mana Reservation, Assassin's Mark Curse Effect, which I don't have yet. Double Corrupted Expedition's End with +2 AoE, +2 duration. This is best in slot, basically. And then this Watcher's Eye with Conversion would allow me to do different stuff on my gloves as well. Not go for conversion there, maybe get some spell suppression and move some stuff around. It bumps me up to 440 million DPS on the aspirational gear. I have these drop downs here. This is my current build at 245. And then if I go ham, I can go to 440 million, which is whatever. Which is way too much. That's my build right now with the gear swap. There's also this aspirational damage tree, 639. This is not going into spell suppression. This is going for Purposeful Harbinger and Empowered Envoy because our Heralds are giving us so much. This is really pushing the damage to the next level. This is basically the big difference. If you don't care about being tankier, drop the spell suppression, get these medium cluster jewels, you'll go to 640 million DPS. That's the only difference. There's no gear difference. Just these jewels. I do want to highlight my Sanctified Relic. I do have a +1 max power charge relic that also has Mage Bane. This is what allows me to max my spell suppression. If we look at my build, I have 245 million with the power charge, and I'm down to only 217 million without it. So yeah, like I said, it's so much overkill. You don't need all of them. Obviously, best in slot is power charge. I like Mage Bane. Lets me max my spell suppression. And then I'll show you guys very quickly the giga ridiculous damage number. This is fake. This is not real. This is fast AF. This is with 2 Blade Vortexes out. This is with Vol Righteous Fire. This is with 2k life. I don't take a single life node on the entire tree. 4 medium cluster jewels, full glass cannon, but this is theoretically what's possible on the high end. This is with double +1/+1 Fizz's extra multi-modded wands. This is with Skin of Lords, actually. So this is so fake that it's like pretending like we kind of can theoretically freeze with Frozen Wake. So it's like, yo, once every 12 seconds, we can, this will proc. Iron Will, +1 power charges, and Balance of Terror, all active. So this is like fake, but you know, when you're making a build, it is useful to like theoretically see what the ceiling is. And this is not the exact ceiling, right? Like there's probably some other stuff. Like I could check, boom, like I just found another 100 million by turning on Unholy Might. This is just super fake, but like I said, it's just fun to play around and see what's theoretically possible that then you can use as a foundation, then building out a high quality of life build and even going down to the budget because you know exactly what to mix and match. I'll share it. You can look at it, but you know, this is not a real build. Okay, I have now been talking for 1 hour and 58 minutes. Hope I can edit this down to a lot less than that. Thank you so much for watching. I'm tossing in thank you to the patrons, especially right now. Thank you to everyone that enjoys the builds that I make. This is the strongest build I've ever played, from budget all the way up until the higher investment. It feels so good to play. There are so many options. I'm so excited to see you guys put the build together and play it. Hopefully everyone gets out there and farms for those items so the availability is enough so people can play it. Let's hope Heatshiver is not nerfed next league. Probably should be, but let's hope it's not nerfed next league so more people can play it. Yeah, let me know how you guys enjoy this build. I'm really excited to see all of you play it and sharing it with me. And if you have any questions about the build or anything, please join the Discord. Please ask me questions on Twitch. And yeah, thanks for watching. See y'all tomorrow.